Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt your breakout working groups, but I know you do want to come back and resume in plenary. So this is the formal part of the evening, which we need to do. And so I'm just going to start out by making a few remarks for an extremely short period of time. I'm going to flag that from the outset, and then we're going to go to the certificate presentation, and then finally we're going to finish with a group photo for everybody. So Lisa says that we're a little bit behind time, so I'm going to blaze off by basically making some comments about what I have actually learnt from the Summer Institute this year. And I think I can boil down my observations, if you like, in terms of four big questions or four challenges. And I think these are big questions or challenges for public diplomacy as a whole, but I'm basing this entirely on the Summer Institute. So the first big idea or big question I have is, what are we to make of the development of public diplomacy as a field? Now, judging from this Summer Institute, I would say that the pace of development of public diplomacy is gathering speed. For example, each year we have been seeing a number of participants come to this Summer Institute, and the level of professional and worldly experience of this group is nothing short of spectacular. And this year we saw an incredible and exponential increase in, let's say, the worldliness of the group. Now, I think this is important for many reasons, but I think it's important because public diplomacy can really be divided into a professional track and a scholarly track. Now, what strikes me is both of these tracks are moving very fast together. So that if you can just imagine these two tracks sort of blazing ahead, my point is basically that if you look at the professional track, you see many countries, non-state actors basically pursuing public diplomacy strategies. There are congressional and parliamentary inquiries in multiple countries around the place. So there's plenty of evidence of professional activity, speed, if you like, in public diplomacy. But at the same time, you see that on the scholarly side as well. If you just look at the number of books, journal articles being published, conferences being held, the academic, the scholarly side of public diplomacy is developing at, I think, an increasing pace as well. Now, the challenge, it seems to me, if my basic observation is correct, is that there needs to be bridges between those two tracks, the scholarly and the professional. Now, I would actually argue that one track can't move forward without the other. I think they are connected. I would argue that, in fact, the theorist needs the practitioner, and the practitioner needs the theorist. The theorist needs the theories, or the theorist, if you like, needs the stories and the narratives. The practitioner's stories and narratives require a framework. This is my argument. Now, the Summer Institute, I basically argue, performs this role. You are the bridge between these two tracks that are, let's say, very observable, and I'm trying to argue a gathering speed. So that's my first thing. It's public diplomacy as a field. I think that it is gathering pace, and it is the momentum is really quite extraordinary. The second big question or challenge I want to mention is that, or the one that I come away with, is what do we think about the ethics of public diplomacy? Now, as you've been discussing, I think, from the very beginning of this Summer Institute, the big dispute here is whether or not public diplomacy is just simply a propaganda wolf dressed up in a public diplomacy sort of sheep's clothing. And I think this is a big question that I think has largely been resolved. And much of Nick Cole's work is focused on that, but I think that conceptual dispute has, in some ways, been put behind us. But I think there are other ethical problems on the horizon. And I think that these are ethical problems and issues that affect both the professional and the scholar. Now, you probably, or most of you at least, will know the great American public diplomacy theorist Stephen Colbert. Now, he actually expresses this best in a concept that he popularized as truthiness. Now, by truthiness, Stephen Colbert means something that seems like the truth we want to exist, but is somehow or other has little regard for evidence and logic. Now, I wonder, in fact, whether we're not witnessing an age of truthiness. And so I can imagine someone being on the Colbert show, being interviewed by him, and I think once upon a time he might have actually accused someone who was trying to finesse his way out of a particularly difficult question by calling them a propagandist or a manipulator or something else. But I can imagine him now, pointing his very accusing finger at someone and saying, well, you are a framer. You are a truthiness framer. And I think that there is something about Stephen Colbert's concept that evokes this particular problem of ethics for the public diplomacy professional and scholar. But my basic point is, do we talk about the ethics of public diplomacy enough on both sides, the scholarly and the practical? But, I'm obviously sort of making a bit of a joke here, what I consider a joke, but if you have to point out that a joke, as someone said to me once, then it hasn't worked. But nonetheless, I have been privileged to be a part of a number of great class sessions over the last couple of weeks, and these issues have been aired in very different ways. And so I would just simply encourage you to keep airing these kinds of, let's call them ethical problems, for want of a better phrase. Now, the third big question I come away with from the Summer Institute is whether public diplomacy will become Americanized or globalized. Now, this is interesting for me because public diplomacy, I think, has to avoid the trap of the discipline that I come from, which is international relations. And the Harvard scholar Stanley Hoffman put it very well in a stinging critique of international relations, which he described as an American social science. Now, this is particularly ironic when we're talking about international relations. But nonetheless, I think you see where I'm headed with this. And I think it is very important, and one big issue that arises here is whether public diplomacy will become obsessed with a fairly narrow issue agenda. One that basically frames the rise of public diplomacy as a response to religious fanaticism or violence or terrorism. I think that would be a mistake. I think public diplomacy should avoid becoming consumed by a fairly narrow self-conception. Rather, I would argue that in fact public diplomacy, or we should take the very best of what the US has to offer, both in terms of the theory and practice of public diplomacy, and there's plenty there over 30, 40 years, but in both the professional and the scholarly dimensions. And so I would make a bit of a plea for people to see that public diplomacy can be developed in a more international direction, and I think even ultimately to have something of a global vocation or impulse. Now, my fourth and final big question that arises from the Summer Institute and the sessions that I've attended and the discussions I've had with everybody is, why should we care about public diplomacy? And my single word answer to this is basically democratization. Now, I think public diplomacy, and I realise that this is, in some circles a controversial term, but nonetheless, I'm going to put it in quotes. Democratization is linked to public diplomacy in the broadest sense of the term. And what I basically mean here is that when social and political entities seek to engage foreign publics, that this is essentially a democratic idea. So I would also claim or argue that in fact public diplomacy is a theory of peace. It assumes that conversations, dialogue between these social and political entities and foreign publics is basically more likely to decrease the risk of war and more likely to increase the risk of international cooperation. Now, I think this assumption, or there's an assumption here that cross-national, cross-regional, interpersonal dialogue basically is a good thing. And I think we basically should say, yes, we support that assumption or that proposition. But I think it has to go even further. It has to include the idea that we even talk to our adversaries. We even talk to our enemies. And this, of course, is an important idea because you're not just making a decision about talking to your enemy government. You are making a deliberate decision to talk to your enemy foreign societies, if you like. I haven't put that as well as I wanted to, but you get the idea. It's not a decision or not whether to talk to the government of Iran or North Korea, but you want to have a conversation, a dialogue of some sort with the civil society, the people of those two countries. And that's the point that I'm trying to drive at there. So that this takes us a very long way from Woodrow Wilson in 1918, 1919, when he was arguing for open diplomacy, open traditional diplomacy. This is the idea of public diplomacy involving much bigger entities dealing with each other. And I think that's really a very, very exciting prospect. But again, we think that this is a good thing, but the problem is not everyone thinks that it is. So one special personal challenge that I think falls under this rubric to some extent is, how does public diplomacy, or can public diplomacy, public diplomats transcend this conflict between representing a national interest and trying to promote international cooperation? And the answer to this, I think, is with great difficulty. But nonetheless, I think it's a challenge and a conflict that every one of us in this room should consider, face, deal with in some way or another. So here again, I think the Summer Institute taught me a lot, because I think it manifests this tension in some really fascinating and creative ways. So that I would say, yes, we have people in the Institute who come from Greece, Japan, the Netherlands, the United States, the United Kingdom, Senegal, Slovakia, Taiwan. But I would pick up on a fairly recent news item. Ronald Reagan and Barack Obama, yes, Ronald Reagan and Barack Obama were right, that we are all ultimately citizens of the world. I think, true, technology, the internet, is bringing us closer to this new world where we are citizens of it, but I think public diplomacy can actually play a part in that, in a way that probably hasn't been quite appreciated up until now. In other words, if we want a more democratic world, we want more and better public diplomacy. That's my contention. So my conclusion, and this I say as a former Australian diplomat, I actually take incredible comfort from the amount of energy, the amount of creativity, the amount of challenging of conventional assumptions, myths and methodologies of public diplomacy that I've seen in the last couple of weeks. And I think that this can only but help an evolving, and what I regard as a particularly fascinating field. So for me, the future of public diplomacy is essentially here in this room, and the sort of network that you will go on to create over time. And it really is quite, let's say, inspiring to basically see this kind of network in the making. Networks and relationships that I'm sure will endure for a very long time. But I do want to finish by saying that we've learnt a great deal from all of you in the time that you've been here. And I thank you for bringing all of your talents and experience to the table. And I want to congratulate you for, of course, formally completing the course. And this leads us to the final part of the ceremony. But before I move to that, I want to just make a special word of thanks to Lisa Larson and her extraordinary contribution to this institute. Lisa, thank you. As you know, Lisa will be taking some time off. She's got some other things to take care of in a few weeks. So Lisa, all the very best for that. And I also want to welcome our guests from the Consular Corps from South Africa, Germany, Taiwan, and Carola Weil from the Dean's Office at the Annenberg School as well. We welcome you all here. What we're going to do now, I'm going to ask if Nick Cole and Eitan Gilboa could step up to the platform. I'm going to call the names of the successful alum, and at this point you're going to have your photograph taken, and you are encouraged to be as rowdy as possible. So, Taro, I believe, is the first. We're going to do this alphabetically. If you need to prepare for, so Taro Aro, you are the first.
Everybody paying attention?
Fleur Cowan.
University of Southern California.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more. Good.
That was a good joke. Jim Gregory.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more. 1.
Amy Hockadell. Yay!
Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more.
Kristen Cohn. Oh.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more.
Kristen Knudsen.
I'd like to thank the Academy. Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2.
And next we have the first of our Dutch representatives. Yes, Simon Kreutzer. Simon.
They spelled your name right. Ready? 1, 2. Got it. Good. Well done.
Soterios Crystallis. Congratulations.
Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more.
Tao-Sheng Kuan.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more for me. 1, 2. One more. Back up.
And next is Dr. Habib Koua. Habib. That Botox hurts. Morris? Where's Morris Liu?
Congratulations. We'll scoot down this banner. Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. And again for me. 1, 2, 3. And there's somebody behind me? Yes. Right. Congratulations.
I'm looking for Mary Liu.
Congratulations. Go. Look at me. Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more for me. 1, 2, 3.
Joe Millett. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. three, and again, one more, 1, 2, 5.
Thank you.
Bo Ogborn.
All right. Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3, and again, one more. Good.
Consul General File. Fatu. And from the film industry, Sandra Schulberg.
We should have the music going at this
I
point.
know.
The outside of par excellence.
Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2. Got it.
Thank you, Sandra. Christina Tribble.
Ready? 1, 2, 3, and got it.
Floris van Hovel. Floris. Congratulations.
Just like your birthday all over. Floris Barrett.
Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Good.
And finally, Tim Wall. Tim. Ooh, dressed for the occasion.
Congratulations. Put it in a good place.
We will be coming round your offices just to check they're on display. Very important part of marketing.
Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more. Got it. Good.
You have to live the brand, remember?
Where are we going to do this? Outside?